we had a news conference, and they asked me the exact same question. I said, I disavow. Now, right after the program that we're talking about, and I thought it was clear, but, we're talking about groups. I do have to know the name of the group, because who knows? I mean, they have to give me the name of the group. But right after, when I reviewed it, I put out a tweet and I put out on Facebook that I totally disavow. Now, everybody knew I did that, but the press refused to look at that. It was right after. And I disavowed then. I disavowed today on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. I disavowed again. I mean, how many times are you supposed to disavow? But I disavow, and hopefully it's the final time I have to do it. But if you look at Facebook and if you look at Twitter, right after the show, I put out a statement because I want everybody to be sure.
Thank you and welcome to Disavowed. I am your always honorable and gracious host, Bebo the Great. Today I have with me the Carnal Conservative. He has a podcast on YouTube. You can reach him at the Carnal Conservative. Welcome, Carnal. You have been disavowed. Tell us a little bit about Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what your podcast is.
Well, my podcast normally covers topics of culture and politics and just a general disgust at the left. I want to make sure that everyone knows and broadcast that the promise of the left is completely not just inhuman. It's unhappy. It's unattractive. It's not going to lead you to any place of fulfillment, whether that's spiritual or sexual.
Well, the basic nucleus of the left, I would say, is like it's weird. It's like the ideology becomes more important than anything, right? Like you got to go with the crowd, right? And then in that same crowd, though, in mentality, it's sort of they have that they always say you have to have a village, right? That's what they say, right? But yet they want to destroy the family.
Exactly, and that's part of the game that they want to play. Is they want to say, come follow us, be a part of our mob, be a part of our hive mind, but leave all of your goodness, all of your humanity at the door. Like, don't expect to have a happy marriage. Don't expect to have a good relationship with your children. Don't expect anything that you as a human being would find constructive and fulfilling, because the moment you go there, you'd have to ask, well, what is this going to ask of me? What is it going to demand? And they want nothing to do with it. Like, as far as they're concerned, that is oppression. And oddly enough, that it's exactly that kind of quote unquote oppression that we human beings, as carnal creatures, get the most joy from. And it's one of my favorite examples about this is Ozzy Osbourne just celebrated his 40th anniversary of the album Blizzard of Oz. And it brought me back to when his wife Sharon put Ozzy Osbourne, the fucking Prince of Darkness, in sex rehabilitation for, having affairs with like one or two other women. And in that interview that she had with, I forget who it was that she was on with, but she reveals that she's not very sexually active. She only wants it once every quarter, once every 3 months, and she's good. And I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, Ozzy fucking Osbourne got trapped by feminism. this rock star, this legend of a man got hoodwinked by feminism, and he's not getting laid by his wife, who he's married to, more than, once every 3 months. I'm thinking to myself, my God, Sharon Osbourne can't learn to suck a dick to save her marriage. And we're criticizing Ozzy Osbourne, the rock star, the drug-addled drunk, who puts out music that we love, because that's the kind of image he puts out. And come to find out, it's all a fucking lie. He's not getting laid more than once every 3 months. That is the hell of Ozzy Osbourne.
Well, apparently he was, because he was cheating on her. He has had to go elsewhere for it.
And then his wife had the honor of dragging her husband out in public and ritually humiliating him for having a sex drive. It's Ozzy Osbourne. He's what, in his 70s, 80s? The man is getting up there. He's still getting it up, apparently. And every erection is a wasted opportunity in the Osbourne household, apparently. and you're thinking to yourself, good God, is this the best case scenario that the modern left has to offer for their superstars? No, fucking leave that shit.
Oh yeah, I think she should go to rehab to or take some type of medication to maybe up her sex drive.
Yeah, like, make some hot herbal tea, get some ginseng in there,
eat some oysters. Oh man, that's crazy, man. But that's the thing, though. See, I'm the type of guy where, like, I don't even think you should, as a couple, as a family, you shouldn't even be putting that stuff out there, really, right? Like, how much damage do you really do to your nucleus family when you put that stuff is meant to be private, right? What do you think so?
Well, of course, it's meant to be private. It's meant to be like, your own. Under some, there is no sanctity of anything. Like, don't expect these people to honor your privacy, your intimate moments. None of that is important to these people, and that's it's those kind of topics that I try to bring to the fore of my channel, and along with the Proud Boys latest debacles, and we have the whole cuties thing. I covered that as well. And it's gone from not just being conducive to your happiness, but being, outright predatory to your family.
What's your stance on the Proud Boys' latest thing with the Trump and all that?
Oh, it's fucking great PR.
Yeah.
Because everyone and their mom who's even remotely associated or knows a Proud Boy knows that the left is full of shit. And when you have Enrique Tarrio as the Proud Boys chairman and declaring that the Proud Boys are a white supremacist organization, it's laughable. It's fucking clown world. Yeah. No one buys it. And then you have these this wonderful event they had in Utah, where they met with a Black Lives Matter group, and they disavowed white supremacy together. Then you had another event. I don't know where that was hosted. But Proud Boys went up and met with another Jewish group and said, yeah, we're anti-white supremacy, and let's take this on together.
Yeah,
so
that was actually last year. That was last year in Farmington, Michigan, at a Jewish like Holocaust museum. Yeah. So I mean, so they've been trying to, prove that they're not racist now since inception, basically, right?
Yeah.
But what's your position on Trump? Because Trump came out, and then afterwards, now he went on Hannity and condemned them, right?
Honestly, I'll be very, very blunt, Bebo.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't give a damn, because it's no longer about whether or not Trump supports the Proud Boys. That the left isn't going to run with that narrative anyway. They're going to say, oh, they're his brown shirts, that there's boots on the street. Whatever. Seriously, it doesn't mean anything. Trump can disavow white nationalists. He can disavow Nazis. He can even go so far as saying, disavow the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys don't operate under Trump. Look, the Proud Boys started out as security for free speech on college campuses. That's how they started out. They started out defending Milo, Gavin, and Coulter. Even now, correct me if this is mistaken, but I even believe they did protection for Tim Pool when he was at certain events, and Lauren Southern, and just the whole gauntlet of conservative talking heads on college campuses. The real message that we need to get out there is that since that time in 2016 or 2015, 2016, things have gotten so bad that the Proud Boys are now in Portland defending your right to exist as a conservative at all.
Right. Yeah, that's my position on it too. Like, the left thinks that they're just going to be able to put their jackboots out in the street, and this is the natural reaction to them. You get what I'm saying? Like, if it wasn't the Proud Boys, some other organization would have popped up. Someone would have filled the void.
Oh, no. It's not Proud Boys. It would have been something far worse.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. The Proud Boys, for all of their shenanigans, and there are many and hilarious shenanigans the Proud Boys have engaged in that I broadly support 100%. There might be one or two instances that I have to disavow as per the podcast instruction. But let's be honest, if not Proud Boys, it would have been something far worse. And let's take it another step. At this point, we're all fucking Kyle Rittenhouse, or we're dead. We're Kyle Rittenhouse, or we're dead.
Yeah. The left acts like we're not even supposed to stand up. How dare you even oppose us? You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't, they don't even want us to have counter protest. You know what I'm saying? Like, these people, they talk about, they'll wear a shirt that says love is the only way while they're hitting you in the head with a baseball bat. You know what I'm saying?
Like lots of people.
Oh man, but honestly, I wish Trump would just come out and be. I still think it means a lot, and just psychologically, like, he should come out and just stick with it, man. Like, no, the Proud Boys aren't the problem, you know.
Well, that's essentially what he said during the debate itself.
Yeah.
Is he didn't disavow the Proud Boys, and that's what the left jumped on. What he said is, "Oh, the Proud Boys. Wait a minute, they're not that bad." And what came out of his mouth was, "Stand down and stand by.
Yeah.
You know, don't engage in the violence." And he's not wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, unless we're being physically attacked, and that's regular Proud Boy protocol.
Yeah.
Unless we're attacked, you get left alone.
Yeah.
You fuck around, you find out.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
I think it's American.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's American
Absolutely.
philosophy. Yeah. So, but all right, now ultimately though, I look at Antifa and BLM. It's more of a spiritual battle to me. Like, they want to destroy the family. It's, if you look at Antifa, they're all pagans, they're Satanists, they're atheists, right? What percentage of Antifa is Christian, would you say?
I'm going to say close to nil. And the only percentage of quote unquote Antifa that are, you know, of any Christian persuasion are those innocent bystanders peacefully protesting that are unironically providing cover for the rioters and the looters. Again, we are all Kyle Rittenhouse at this point. And the fact is, when Kyle Rittenhouse just so happened to shoot at Antifa, was it a coincidence that literally 3 for 3, he got violent offenders and 2 pedophiles? Was it 1 or 2 pedophiles that Kyle Rittenhouse said?
Well, the first one was a pedophile, I know for sure. The second one he killed, I don't know if he was, but they all had some type of criminal records. The third one that pulled the gun was not supposed to own a gun. He had a felony, right? And he was never charged. Never charged. Yeah.
An absolute miscarriage of justice. But again, we disavow and we move on. But take that demographic. Of all the 3 people shot by Kyle Rittenhouse, they were all miscreants. They were all criminals. They were all felons. They were all literally the worst people of our society.
Yeah.
So the idea that we're going to have any good Christian ethos come out of these protests, these violent riots, is absolute foolishness. We're not going to get to a place of peace and reconciliation or any Christian virtue by appeasing these movements at all.
Right.
And they're not interested in it, and neither should we.
Right. But how do you feel like the churches teach us to be meek, to be humble, right? Do you feel that like the church's teaching is sort of like leading us down this path? Like,
no, I don't. And here's the thing: you have to separate policy and culture from doctrine. That is a fine line that as Christians we all have to walk. And you have to understand now. You and I are both Latter-day Saints,
right?
And we just had General Conference, and we had a talk by Elder Oaks about racism and whatnot. And I had someone spurging on me about how the church was going leftist, and they're not. What they are doing, and you have to understand this, is they are running an international global organization, and they have a mandate. They have a mandate to grow this church, grow this organization, pretty much by any means necessary. And the whole nature of that mandate can be summed up in a phrase that the Savior used, saying to be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That is their mandate when it comes to growing and magnifying the church. And when Elder Oaks gave his address, when he gave his talk on essentially law and order, because for those of you who don't know, Elder Oaks is in fact a lawyer. He was a member of the Utah Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of that region. And he was for a long time on the presidential shortlist for SCOTUS nominee picks before he became an apostle. Many people don't know that. So when he speaks, and when he speaks, whether it's on gay marriage, whether it's on abortion, whether it's on things like the riots, he is speaking very, very precisely. And what he precisely said was not, yes. Well, what he says is that racism is a problem, and that it should be discouraged. No shit. That's a given.
Right.
It should. And many people are triggered by this, especially if you're in the political zone, because we understand that you don't apologize. However, when an apostle gets up to speak to the congregation or the church of God, they're not apologizing, they're speaking truth. So we have to remove that kind of heavily political context that we're used to engaging in, and we have to take all those filters off. Because if you're looking at it through a political lens, yeah, you're going to get triggered. And, I'm watching it and I have to, okay, I need to go back into like, normal mode, like before everything was so heavily political, because that's where they're speaking from.
Right.
So he basically says that, racism is bad, don't do it. Again, of course. But then right after that, he says, look, if you're engaging in political demonstrations in any way that is anything other than, the peaceful protest that you are permitted from this First Amendment, you're wrong. And you need to stop, and we're not going to support you. And that was the main takeaway. And that is not center of the road. That's a very clear divide on where the church stands. And that is what we have to understand when we listen to the prophets and the apostles speak on these matters. Is one, it's not through the modern political lens that most people on the right are accustomed to viewing things. And secondly, when we analyze their words literally and take them at face value, the hard line that they fall on is A, religious liberty, your civil rights as granted from the Constitution, and basic good inherent Christian values that they're supporting. There was another talk by Todd Christofferson that I loved about culture. And anyways, that's was there any? I'm kind of wandering off topic a little bit.
Well,
so bring me back to what you wanted to.
I want to discuss culture a little bit. I think everything is the culture wars right now. I think the right began to give up on the culture wars, and I see the effects of it now. Like at the time, 10, 15 years ago, the right was sort of throwing the culture wars by the wayside, trying to worry about, getting votes and financial conservatism, which basically right now, our deficit's up to almost 30 trillion now. There's no.
That's why being a Latter-day Saint is so awesome. We didn't give up the culture war. We've never been political, but we've never given up the culture war. And as far as being a cultural institution, the Latter-day Saints are by far the most conserved, the most involved, the most active in things. Even still, we haven't bent on gay marriage.
I agree.
We haven't bent the knee on abortion. We never will. They're trying to get women ordained to the priesthood. That's not going to happen. And very recently, their current wedge issue to get to us has been racism, to which the church has said we've always said that racism is bad.
Well, they look at the history. They're doing the same thing they're doing to the whites right now. They 200 years ago, or you guys didn't allow African Americans into the priesthood until 79. That's what they and I actually had a PB virtue signaling me on Mormonism the other day. It was disgusting, I
love it. I love it when people not in the faith try to tell us what we believe.
Yeah.
That always,
you guys aren't Christian.
That always tickles me.
You guys aren't Christian.
That always tickles me.
Yeah.
No, it's and I've this has been a topic for several people on the currently in the online forums, because I found a book written by a member, and it absolutely disgusted me, titled "Mormonism and White Supremacy."
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Hell no.
Let me guess, they're using the Journal of Discourses, quotes from Brigham 100 years ago, right? Yeah.
Well, not only that, but if you look at this author, and she claims to be LDS, she's an active Latter-day Saint member, but she's not married in the temple. She's not. She's married to a Jew, and he's so they have this like multi-religion family, and what else? What else was her stick? Or another part of this woman's collected works is decolonizing Mormonism. Now, let me explain something. If you're a Latter-day Saint, you're taught something about the prophet of the Restoration, Joseph Smith. And that is that he was a literal descendant of Joseph of Egypt. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't care either way. But when you say decolonizing Mormonism, what you're essentially saying is that Joseph Smith's relationship to the West, to England, to the American experiment, that inherently delegitimizes him, the priesthood, and our faith. This has nothing to do with the banning of the priesthood to blacks. That's what they say it's about.
Right.
But what this is really about is delegitimizing the faith as a quote unquote white-centered construct. And my whole argument with that is, so what? I don't care what means God decided to use to restore the gospel. I don't care which culture or society he used to make his will manifest. That's his business.
Right. Well,
and
you got to realize too, they literally, it was their survival. When the church first started, these people there were states out here giving passing laws allowing you to murder the saints without repercussion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like these people moved out west to the desert in the middle of nowhere. At the time, it was America owned it, right? But it was what did they call it? I forget.
No.
It was a territory.
Yeah, we went to the Utah territory and built it from the ground up. But before that, we went to Independence, Missouri, and built that bitch from the ground up.
Yeah. And
before that, we were in Nauvoo, Illinois, which was a goddamn swamp. We were the first we were the first Christian movement to literally drain the swamp. Literally. We drained the swamp. We built a beautiful city that everyone else came and said, those weird Mormons are here, kick them out. Every fucking time. So by the time we get to, banning the blacks from the priesthood for reasons literally no one understands why that happened. Like, if you try to go back in church history, no one can figure out why it happened, because, even if you were dependent all on Brigham Young and his alleged racism, here's what's weird about Brigham Young and exploring the priesthood ban. He was supportive of Joseph Smith ordaining blacks to the priesthood in the early days of the church.
Right.
He was proud of it. And even after he had instituted the priesthood ban, if you go back and you read his writings concerning the Civil War and everything that was going on with blacks at that time period, he is completely devoid of any racial hatred or animosity towards blacks. So something happened, and no one knows what the communication was between Brigham Young and the Lord or the apostles. No one understands how this happened or how it came to be. My personal theory on this is that he was instructed of the Lord in some way or another there was a communication. I don't know the nature of the communication. I don't know what was said or how things were taken, but essentially he was directed to not throw the saints into the incoming Civil War.
Yeah, well,
and somehow.
And even if you look at it, though, today, there's literally now more members of the church outside of America than there is in America. A huge portion of the church is maybe not black, but people of color, right? Like, Hispanics are huge. There's a big following down in Latin America, right? Like, it's not like
Brazil has its own NPC.
Yeah. So why this is the same thing with blacks bringing up slavery to whites. You got to forgive. If you forgive, okay, let's say you're in a relationship and your spouse cheats on you. If 15 years down the road you get in an argument about someone leaving the cereal or milk out and you bring up the cheating every time, you haven't forgave that person, right?
Yeah. And it's bizarre because there is a movement nefariously within the church by those who are advocating things that the church doesn't advocate. Well, for example, this woman who wrote these 2 books, who is allegedly a church member, she's pro-gay, she's pro-abortion, she is a bona fide leftist who has picked up a megaphone to speak for the church on these matters when she has no authority to do so. Right. And it's incredibly disturbing the amount of tolerance that we have for these specific individuals. And when the whole ordained women thing came about, the church is not. One of the things I love about the church is we're not afraid to excommunicate you if you step out of line. And I'm sorry, but I will forever praise the Lord having a standard and enforcing it. That's what it's there for. And so, when it comes to forgiveness in terms of blacks in the priesthood, I honestly don't know the dynamic that should play, because again, we have no idea what was said or what brought it about. We have no idea if there is anything to apologize for.
Right.
And then that's the real crux of the issue. It doesn't look like it was a revelation. It could have just been a policy change, and no one knows why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some people that don't even like what it says in the Book of Mormon about, the Nephites, right? It was the Nephites that were the ones that were cursed.
No, it was the it was the Lamanites.
Lamanites, right?
And here's the thing: as you go through the Bible and the Book of Mormon, when we talk about white and black skin, the reason that those colors are given isn't literal. They're not. There wasn't a literal cursing of black skin. Black is an adjective to describe something that is gloomy or depressing, or something that is heavy on you.
Right.
And that is what those scriptures mean. They're idioms. They're ancient Israeli idioms that Joseph Smith couldn't have come up with, because he grew up, millennia later, and he's literally translating the Book of Mormon, almost in certain cases letter by letter. So when he's writing down these ancient Israeli idioms that he personally doesn't even understand, I don't know, maybe a cultural misinterpretation happened, but it was, when they talk about whiteness and blackness in the Book of Mormon and in other ancient scriptures, it's describing your mood, it's describing your demeanor, it's describing your presence. Because let's be clear, when we talk about white and black skin, even the blackest that a Lamanite could have gotten was Native American red. just to be perfectly clear, when we're talking about like the alleged black skin of the Lamanites, of the ancient Lamanites, these were the ancestors of the Native Americans, of the indigenous peoples of Central and South America.
See, my position on it though is, anyway, even if let's say that is true and it's not up for interpretation, right? Who cares? If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're to forgive, right? We're always to forgive. And most of these people that come talking to me, they're Christians. They claim to be Christians, right? But yet they, for some reason in the body of Christians outside of Mormonism, they don't even consider Mormons to be Christian, a lot of them. There's a huge chunk.
Well, they're not Christians either. I mean, right. Where is the doctrine of the Trinity in the Bible? The Trinitarians aren't true Christians. I mean, I don't care who that triggers, but it's true. If you think that God is some conglomeration of three people who are, somehow separate yet together in some amorphous spiritual mass, you're denying the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He was resurrected in a physical body. It was his body. It wasn't anyone else's body. And there's just so much discombobulation between the Christian sects as to who they even define God to be. Do not come to my faith and tell me I don't know who Christ is, or that I'm not a Christian.
Right. And I'm a convert. I converted, right? I'm Italian, right? So my family
Oh,
grew,
me too.
like like it was a big deal when I converted. Like my family was not happy. Like like Catholicism and being Italian is pretty connected. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
and my relative, I actually have an ancestor that was an anti-pope. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Great Schism of the church back in the old days, in the like
Oh,
1400s. Yeah, my
but 14.
it,
Okay.
the
All right.
the Great Schism was when the church left Rome, and then the Pope was held captive in France, and King Philippe of France, King Philip, wanted to hold
Mhm.
the Pope in France, and he wanted to elect French popes, and so
Oh,
then
good Lord.
and then after that, there ended up being three popes, and one of them are my ancestors. I don't know if they're my exact, because we're big into the genealogy stuff, the church, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. We're knowing who and where you come from.
I looked it up, and I'm either directly, I can't tell if I'm directly related or not, because everyone in the town that he went and did some work out east for the church, and they gave him a town, one of his nephews actually, and then everyone in that town loved him so much they all took his name. So at that point, I can't do any more genealogy. It's just too messed up, and the records over in Italy are not as good as over, the American records are more recent, but so
Yeah.
but he was an anti-pope John the 23rd. So like literally my family was involved in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church at one time. And see what you're talking about with the Trinity, that was actually discussed at the Council of Nicaea during Constantine, when Constantine had his vision, right? And I sort of get why the church left it out. See, basically, the Mormon belief was discussed at the council. The similar Mormon belief, obviously, Mormonism wasn't around back then, but there was a group of people that ended up wanting to have it separate also. But
No. I have to correct you. What you're talking about is the belief that was debunked at the Nicene Council was Arianism. And Arianism said that Christ lived, that he was a real person, but that he wasn't a divine person.
right,
And that is not that is not the Latter-day Saint stance on Jesus Christ.
all right.
The stance from the Latter-day Saints is that he was the literal Son of God, but that the Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost are not one person. They're not one deity.
Right.
They're not certain. They're not.
Arianism shares that part. They didn't believe.
It shares that part, but it also says that Christ wasn't the Son of God. It de-deified Christ, and that's where they were rightfully denounced as heretics.
Right.
Because you can't have a Christian system of belief that doesn't deify Christ.
Right.
He is God, or he is not God, and Christ is God.
Yeah, well, if you read up on it, the reason they decided to put them as one was they had a fear of paganism trying to co-opt basically Christianity.
Well, yes, and that was an interesting debate, and it goes back even further from Constantine. You have to go back to a philosopher. I don't know if he was a Greek philosopher, but he used Greek philosophy to kind of reconcile that difference. His name was Origen, Saint Origen, and he was a philosopher / theologian who tried to reconcile the reality of God in connection to their doctrine and their whole theological structure. The problem is that Origen's line of thinking was pagan. It was Greek. It wasn't the original, true, and Semitic understanding of God.
Right.
God as a sovereign individual who lorded over his chosen people. That idea was lost with Origen because they needed to crystallize the notion of God as the true ruler of the world, and it fell flat. They tried to reconcile these things, and it fell flat because you don't mingle scripture with the philosophies of men. When you read the scriptures and you define and you come to a definition of deity, you are obligated to allow God to define himself. And what happened is they came up with a formula of God that was in outright contradiction to the God described in the Bible and as God revealed to man in Christ Jesus. And you simply cannot have a coherent definition of God that is outside of those parameters. And you see this played out in most debates with atheists. And in terms of defining God between the Trinity and the existence of God being no God, which would be the atheist position, the atheists win. Because even when you go back to the canon, this Trinitarian notion and all of the tangent presuppositions that the Trinity entails, all of the abstract characteristics that this Trinitarian deity must contain and must be held to, are obviously contradicted in the record of God's interaction with his people.
Right.
And so the atheists are of course going to win. They're going to say, look, your God is a lie. He's a hypocrite. He's a liar. And by the standard of the Trinitarian notion, they're right.
Right.
So for the love of God, stop preaching an idea of God that is not as God defines himself. Let God do the heavy lifting. He's already done it. He's already revealed himself. Stop going beyond the text and just love God as he's revealed himself. This is not a question of the Nicene Creed, and you bring up the Nicene Creed and Arianism as that kind of battlefront, but there was a far more interesting fight for the identity of God, and it was a very quiet and sad fight that occurred in the great church in the Egyptian Church of Alexandria. And what happened is all of these Nicene figureheads visited the Church of Alexandria. And what happened was a very discouraging exchange between all of these philosophical eggheads and a very humble elderly monk named Serapion. Serapion was a venerated, holy man who had performed many miracles over the course of his life, and he had a reputation of being a devout and faithful member of the church. He was a man of miracles. He was a man of faith. But he was a simple and childlike follower of Christ. And when they brought to him this non-anthropomorphic God, this God without a body, he protested. And there was a riot in Alexandria. And what happens afterwards is literally a dismissal of this great man's faith and experiences and miracles by literally calling him an ignoramus, an uneducated fool, someone who lacked refinement, someone who lacked education. And they literally shit on Serapion as a faithful man of God because he didn't accept or understand these things which they were trying to push through the church at that time.
So,
and that is the core of it. It's hyper-intellectualism virtue versus the God you know and experience in your everyday life.
All right. So my question would be, why is this such a issue of contention over the history of Christianity and the church? Yeah, like people don't really discuss this, but there's literally been people killed and people fighting over this issue throughout thousands of years now.
Power. The Catholic Church was formulated to consolidate Christianity as a form of power.
Right.
And one of the more hilarious manifestations of that is, okay, the Catholic Church wins. They're in power. They have all of the influence they could ever ask for. So when political upheavals occur and the people have to choose between the Catholic Church and the Catholic Church, and these contests arrive in trying to take power in some form or another, we get the first example of virtue signaling from the Catholic Church in this newfangled ideal called altruism. And this idea that if you are more altruistic and therefore more Christ-like, that you are more worthy of power from the people.
Right.
Now, there is no scriptural evidence to suggest that the God of the Bible is an altruist. Now, if I may quickly define what altruism is for the layman, altruism is basically acting in good faith with no expectation of reward or benefit. And that this even goes so far as saying, I do good things, not even to get the emotional reward of doing good things.
Right.
That is not altruistic enough. And it was such a virtue, it's such an empty virtue signal.
Right.
I
think altruism is damaging in some cases. I truly believe when the modern world ends up having financial upheaval, which I feel is eventually going to come with the economics that we're facing, you're going to see the altruism in this world play out in Africa when all these nations are going to have to start caring about their own citizens rather than pouring in all these resources. How much does Africa receive in free resources from well, I don't know if they're really free. We probably take the resources half the time and give it back to them. But you get what I'm saying. It's going to cause a collapse eventually.
Well, and that's the true trick of it all. Altruism is a lie. The idea of altruism as a virtue is one of the greatest farces I've ever heard. And yet, because the Catholic Church had complete hegemonic power, they had to have a way of distinguishing themselves from one another, and their formulation for making those distinctions was altruism. And it's a virtue for the sake of gaining power. And it's obviously corrupt. It's obviously wrong.
Are you familiar with the Great Schism and what ended up happening and how they reunited the church?
No, I do not. Please enlighten me.
Okay, so there was the anti-pope Baldassare, which is my ancestor. There was another anti-pope that was in a pope in Rome, and then there was a pope in France. So they called for they called for a meeting it was in Turkey. I forget which city. Not Nicaea, but it was a different council. And
Constantinople.
I'm not sure. I have a hard time remembering everything specific. But anyway, they called a big and this was the beginning of Lutheranism also. Like it was the guy that taught Martin Luther showed up as the representative for Lutheranism at the time. I forget his name, but he showed up, and they were not happy with the Lutherans at all, right? And
no.
And so they show up and they promise him his protection. But the agreement on the meeting is no matter what, at this meeting, one pope must come out and the church must be united. No matter what, right? So so they show up, they instantly they tell the Lutheran guy, we promise you'll be fine even though you're an enemy of the church right now. He shows up, they just kill him instantly.
Oh, shocking.
Yeah, they kill him. And then my ancestor ends up losing the vote to become pope. He put it all together, assuming that he was going to become pope, right? And then he ends up running on him after because he don't get to be pope. That's why he's an anti-pope now. He's not recognized as a pope from the Catholic Church anymore. But then they make a deal with him and they're like, dude, come back. We don't want you running off, starting another branch, and somehow they got him to come back and then he ends up retiring. But they ended up killing the Lutherans off right there at that meeting.
I believe it.
And then that's how they moved the church back to Rome it was somewhere in France. And have you the saying Friday the 13th, like it's got a horrible condemnation, right?
Yep.
Right. And that actually came from a real thing. That's when the Knights Templars were murdered. Now everyone knows the Knights Templars, and they talk about the catacombs and what was written on the catacombs and they accuse of them being like homosexuals and worshiping. I don't know if you've ever heard that they were supposedly worshiping the head of John the Baptist. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh my gosh.
And
no.
That's where the actual name the Baphomet came from. And that was supposed to be John the Baptist's head they were supposedly worshiping in the catacombs and stuff. But they were set up. The Knights Templars were set up. That was all nonsense made up. And then they killed all the Knights Templars because King Philippe in France. See, what ended up happening is, you're familiar with the Silk Road?
Yes.
The path to China for trade to Europe?
Uh-huh.
Right? The Knights Templars used to protect it. And they would charge a fee. And
okay.
The Knights took an oath of poverty, right? But they ended up becoming the most richest people because they were protecting the Silk Road. And they were taking a percentage of all the stuff coming through. Right? So they became wealthy. And King Philip in France owed them a bunch of money. So he just whacked them out on Friday the 13th.
Oh
he just killed them out. And then he made up the whole catacomb story and that they were homosexuals and worshiping the head of John the Baptist, Baphomet.
Good Lord.
Yeah, but dude, you know a lot about church history, though. I like you talking with you. You're probably even more well versed than me, and I read quite a bit about it. And that's why I enjoy talking with you. You don't only know the LDS history. You know a lot of history.
Well, to understand LDS history, you do have to go back and evaluate the way that the Lord moved between other movements like the Reformation, like the Industrial Revolution, like the Enlightenment and the Renaissance before that. You have to understand what happened to the primitive church between the time of the apostles being killed off and events like the Nicene Creed. And you have to understand all of the things that went wrong and fell apart, that we lost all of the plain and precious truths that were restored through the prophet Joseph Smith. Because everything that he restored isn't difficult to grasp. No. And yet, and even if you were to read the Bible of your own accord, the things that Joseph restored, all of it is biblically based. I mean, and even if you read the Book of Mormon, it harkens back to the Old Testament covenant that Israel had with their God. So there is nothing in the Book of Mormon that you wouldn't learn reading the Old and New Testaments. It's just a reinforcement of those two testaments, of those two witnesses.
I agree.
And understanding historically how things went from plain and simple truth to complex theological, philosophical bullshit is something that, if you're interested in defending the faith, you have to know. And so it's been a part of my my intellectual and spiritual journey, is learning all of these different comings and goings.
All right. Anything else you like to add? We've got about 5 minutes.
Off the top of my head, I don't really have much to add. Just
right. Yeah, I think that's a good spot to end it up. We can talk more about this some other time and stuff like that. Is there any place you can be found other than your YouTube channel?
No, just stick to the YouTube for now. And every YouTube has has links to my social media. It has links to my Telegram, my Discord. Go ahead and visit me there. So just click on any video and you'll find all that information. But what I would like to add in terms of religion and politics and all of that, we need to remember as Latter-day Saints that we are of Ephraim, that our ethos comes from being the lost tribe of Israel, the birthright tribe. We are the ones who will gather Zion again, and it is through our heritage and our culture that we will make the world whole, and we need to be proud of that history.
Amen.
No matter what.
Amen, brother. Amen. All right, we'll leave it right there. All right, Carnal Conservative, you have been disavowed.